I want to talk about something that I have not heard on air from anybody. I'm not hearing it from any news medias, and I'm not hearing it from all the great real estate shows that I listen to. And I listen to a lot of great ones, and that's how I'm able to actually learn more if some of these guys put a lot of work into what they're doing.
Yeah, and Randy eats, sleeps, and breathes real estate and mortgages.
So,
and I mean like 24/7.
So I am not an accountant or financially inclined in any way whatsoever. So this is not to be taken as fact. And since nobody's talking about it, you would almost believe, or I have the fear that I would be wrong or maybe not allowed to talk about it, because I do know that here in Canada, Justin Trudeau is doing his best to censor what they speech, or is some kind of speech. It's not necessarily hate speech. It's just speech that he's or the system doesn't want being said. And this would probably fall in that realm. And the reason being is because the Bank of Canada does run our economy in many different ways. So we do know that it made the newspaper that in the third quarter, the Bank of Canada lost $500 million, to be more exacting, $522 million. That made the news. And it was the first time in history since the Bank of Canada opened, which is 87 years, the Bank of Canada has been around. And they've had, and there's 4 quarters to a year. So they've done many, many reportings, close to between 300 and 400 different reporting cycles. And they have never, ever lost a penny. They're always making $1 billion to $2 billion a year plus. But not this Bank of Canada today, because this Bank of Canada today went into this quantitative easing along with many of their associates and friends. So the United States, New Zealand, Australia, England, many of them decided that they were going to do this, what they would call quantitative easing, which basically is a way for the banks to print money directly for the Bank of Canada to print money directly into the banking system. So therefore, the Bank of Canada is not printing the money. They are increasing the bank's settlement balances, so the monies that they owe each other. They're increasing those settlement balances, and therefore they're not printing money, but the bank is getting, in essence, money. So it's a really fascinating thing that the Bank of Canada would actually say that is not printing money. It is printing money. It's just printing money for the Bank of Canada exclusively. And so what they did was, the federal government, and this is really, I think, really important, and I think that it should become illegal, and I think that that Canadians really need to try to wrap their heads around this, and I'm doing my best. This is not something that I understand fully from school, or something that I took in school, so it requires a fair amount of attention to figure it out. And as you start to figure it out, because we don't have the proper education, we see it through a different lens. So if we were properly educated onto the system, we would be perfectly okay with it. But because we don't have those foundations, like the aristocrats that actually talk about this kind of stuff, they think it's okay. But as just typical citizens, if we did this, it would be absolutely illegal and we would be in jail. Now, what they've done is they are not allowed, they do not have the mandate or the ability to buy bonds. The Bank of Canada cannot buy the federal government bonds. The Bank of Canada can prepare them for sale, but they can't buy them. Okay, so what they decided is, since there's legislation that doesn't allow for that conflict of interest to take place, they can't buy it from the federal government. They're selling them. So what happens is our federal government spends money. And because they have good credit, the money that they spend, they need it back. And what they do is they repackage it and give this debt a new name. Now, I'm oversimplifying things, but I'm giving you the generalities. That debt becomes a bond. So imagine you rack up credit card debt. Then you can take your credit card. Now, it's not quite this simple, but you can take your credit card and you can now, because you have excellent credit history, you can now sell it to an investor who will give you the money for that, in essence, pay it off, and then you pay them interest on it. So it's basically the credit card for the federal government. So now the federal government is supposed to be responsible. They're supposed to say, okay, we're collecting this amount of taxes, so this is all the money we have, so this is all we can spend. But they found a new way around it, right? The bonds really help with that. We can spend more and we can worry about it at another time. When our kids become older and we're gone, they can try to worry about it then. And then those politicians then go that cycle and increase it. And it just seems like us as Canadians and around the world, it's generally accepted. I don't know why. I think that we're all so busy trying to do other things that we kind of let go of this. But what's happened is the federal government was spending so much money that their bonds were useless. That debt was not being honored by investors. Nobody wanted it. It was like, no, dude, you can't pay this back. We don't want, you're spending way too much. You're careless. You're reckless. So what the Bank of Canada and the other central banks did, I think they had a meeting and all came together and said, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't we, because it was done before, and everywhere, every time it was done, it was pretty much disastrous anyways in terms of inflation and things of that nature. So what they said is, hey, if we buy these bonds, then we can then take all your debt, so you can spend more. But we can't buy your bonds because it's mandated. So if we change the rules, then it would cause all kinds of catastrophes. So this is what we can do. We can make an announcement. So I would say there's two ways I could say this. You go and you have a backroom meeting with the banks and say, hey, buy those bonds and I will buy them back from you and I'll give you a profit. But that's not what they did. But to me, it just seems like that's what they did. But that's obviously not, because they're not as scamish as that. However, what supposedly they did was they just made an announcement. So they have like this announcement board that if these list of approved financial institutions buy the bond, we will buy X amount of bonds from the banks or the institutions that want to sell them, and we will pay. And you guys can give us basically a bidding amount, and we'll pick from whichever ones we want to buy. Therefore, you will make a profit, and you guys can sort of bid the profit levels up and down. And then the Bank of Canada was buying them all back. So hear this one out one more time. The federal government creates a lot of debt. They say they want to pay all of the people who are bagging groceries during COVID. We want to make their wages 50% higher. That did happen here in Canada. He gave them a 50% increase and called them soldiers, basically frontline soldiers on the war on COVID. And then so he gave the baggers of grocery stores 50% increase on their income, or $5 bonus per hour on their income. So I don't think that's 50%, it might be 33%, but insane that you pick a particular class and that's what you do. And they were just giving away money like this to all these special groups that they decided were worthy of this extra money that they're going to do. And then the Bank of Canada took that, turned it into a bond, allowed the banks to buy it, and then bought it back from the banks. So the banks made a profit right off the get-go for taking part in this I don't want to say illegal, but it just seems illegal because you're not allowed to buy them. So then you have this process of buying them legally. So that seems like a conflict. It seems wrong. So they did this to the tune of $397 billion or $94 billion, somewhere around that number. That's what they did and created all these settlement balances. So the banks made money during this. Then, what happened? The Bank of Canada said, oh no, inflation is through the roof. Why is inflation through the roof? Because before COVID, there was $100 billion, $97 billion, I believe, floating around in the economy, making the economy work. And then during the COVID, there's $394 billion floating around in the economy. Now, remember, none of us were working or doing anything or leaving our homes or shopping, but there was all this money floating around because of the Bank of Canada. So what happens? They increase the interest rates because inflation went crazy, and they blame the inflation on us. And inflation is just another tax anyways, because we got to pay more for everything. Bank of Canada lost $522 billion in the third quarter. In the fourth quarter, they lost $1.2 billion. Sorry, $522 million in the third quarter.
Yeah, I was going to say.
$1.2 billion in the fourth quarter, and ended up with a negative loss of $705 million for the year. So they lost the 740 they did the first quarter, they lost the 281 they did the second quarter, and they came out and they came out of it with a big negative, losing money. And they're going to lose money every single quarter until they change those interest rates back, because they got to pay the banks extra interest. And that's just not fair. Thank you for watching our video. We hope you enjoyed it. And please let us know your thoughts in the comments, as well as any questions you may have. We're live most Saturdays at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so make sure to tune in. Thank you again for watching, and remember to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and click the bell icon so you can stay up to date on all our future uploads.